They say blood is thicker than water, but when my daughter slammed the door in my face as snow piled up outside, I realized that family bonds can sometimes be as fragile as glass. What she didn't know was that the keys to their dream vacation home were still in my purse. This is the story of how I went from shivering in my car during the worst blizzard in decades to reclaiming my dignity, and teaching my ungrateful family the hardest lesson they'd ever learn. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. Martha Wilson sat in the familiar comfort of her armchair, the fading light of the evening casting shadows across the room. The house, the one she and Gerald had built together, felt quieter than ever. It had been 5 years since Gerald's passing, and though the ache of his absence had softened in some ways, it was still there, lingering like an old scar that never quite healed. Martha had learned to live with it, to navigate widowhood with grace, but today, something had changed. The betrayal she had just experienced felt more profound than the grief she had carried for so long. Rebecca, her only daughter, had always been a source of pride for Martha. She had been a good child, an ambitious one, who had grown up to be a loving, albeit sometimes demanding, adult. But lately, things had begun to shift. It started small, Rebecca suggesting a retirement community for Martha when she was still perfectly healthy, talking about selling the house they had shared for so long, as if it was simply an asset to be disposed of. At first, Martha had laughed it off, but the more Rebecca pushed, the more Martha felt like she was being boxed into a corner. She knew what her daughter was thinking, that she was getting older, that she needed help, that it was time to let go. But Martha wasn't ready to let go, not of her house, not of her independence. She didn't need Rebecca to take care of her. She had lived here for decades, through both the good and bad times, and this house was more than just a building. It was a monument to everything she and Gerald had built together. It was the place where they had raised Rebecca, where they had laughed, fought, loved, and lost. This house wasn't just walls and windows. It was their legacy. And yet, it felt like Rebecca didn't understand any of that anymore. The tipping point had come a few weeks ago when Rebecca had arranged for a contractor to come over under the guise of evaluating the house for sale. It had started innocuously enough. Just a look at the property, Rebecca had said, but it became clear as the days passed that something more was afoot. There were plans in motion, things being discussed behind closed doors that Martha wasn't privy to. And the final blow came when Rebecca handed her a form. "Here, Mom," she had said, her voice soft but insistent. "This is a simple cognitive evaluation. It's for your own good. It'll help us understand what's best for you." Martha's stomach had turned. A cognitive evaluation? For what? She had no need for it. She had been managing her life just fine. Thank you very much. The paper in her hands felt like a direct attack. Rebecca and Daniel, her son-in-law, had been trying to plant seeds of doubt in her mind for months, but this was the final straw. It wasn't about her well-being. It was about her autonomy, her control. They didn't want to help her. They wanted to control her. "Stop lying to me," Martha had said, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with the anger she was trying to keep in check. "There's no insurance requirement. There's no reason for this evaluation other than to build a case against me." Rebecca had flinched, her eyes darting away from her mother's steady gaze. The confirmation Martha needed. "Mom," Rebecca had said, her voice cracking. "It's not like that. We're just concerned about you. You've been so stubborn, so resistant to any change. We just want to help." "Help?" Martha had echoed, her voice growing colder. "You don't help by undermining me, by questioning my ability to think for myself. I don't need you to take over my life." Rebecca had opened her mouth to argue, but Martha had cut her off. "Don't you dare invoke your father in this," Martha had warned, her voice dangerously soft, every word deliberate. "Gerald believed in dignity and respect. He would be ashamed of this. He would be ashamed of you." Rebecca had recoiled as if slapped, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "You're twisting everything. You don't understand. Daniel and I are doing what's best for you. We're looking out for you, like Dad would have wanted us to. Dad, Martha had said, the bitterness slipping into her tone. Don't you dare use your father as an excuse for this. Gerald would have never gone behind my back to try to control my life. Not like this. Rebecca had faltered, her face a mask of frustration and guilt, but Martha could see it now, the truth in her daughter's eyes. This wasn't about helping her. This was about something else. About money, about property, about power. For a long moment, Martha had stood in the silence, her breath shallow, heart pounding. Then, in the quiet, she had made her decision. I think you should leave, she had said finally, her voice surprisingly calm but firm. I need some distance. I need to think about where this relationship is going. You've crossed a line, Rebecca. And I'm not sure if it can be undone. Rebecca had opened her mouth to protest, but Martha had turned away. She couldn't bear to hear another word. When Rebecca had finally left, Martha had collapsed on the couch. The betrayal, the manipulation, it was too much. The floodgates opened then. She cried, not just for the loss of her husband, not just for the years of widowhood, but for the relationship that had crumbled before her eyes. Her only daughter, the one person she had tried to protect, to love unconditionally, had turned on her. And for what? For a house. For control. For money. Martha had never felt so alone. She picked up the phone, dialing the number of the one person who had always been there, Helen. Helen had been her friend for decades, the one person who had stood by her through every joy and heartbreak. When the phone picked up, Martha could barely speak. She could only choke out the words, Helen, I need you. Within the hour, Helen arrived at her doorstep, arms open, pulling Martha into a fierce hug. I'm so sorry, Martha, Helen murmured. You didn't deserve this. Martha had sat down on the couch, feeling like every ounce of strength had been drained from her body. What kind of daughter arranges a cognitive evaluation for her mother without even talking to her about it? She asked, her voice cracking. I've spent my life loving her, and this is how she repays me. Helen had sat beside her, rubbing Martha's back. This isn't about you being unreasonable, Martha, she said gently. It's about control. Rebecca and Daniel have convinced themselves they know what's best for you, and they're willing to do anything to make it happen, including using you as a pawn. Martha wiped away a tear. I feel so betrayed, she said quietly. I can't believe they'd go this far. After everything. And they don't even see it. They just think they're helping me. Helen nodded. They're wrong. But we'll figure this out. We'll make sure they know they can't push you around like this. I don't know if I can ever trust Rebecca again, Martha whispered, her heart heavy with grief. Helen squeezed her hand. You don't have to decide that right now. You need to take care of yourself first. This is about protecting you. And healing. The rest will come when it's ready. Martha leaned back in the chair, her mind swirling with anger and confusion. She had to protect herself. But from what? From Rebecca? From the people she loved most? The rain continued to fall, a steady rhythm against the window. Martha sat in the quiet, not sure where to go from here, but determined to find her way. Martha stared out the window, her mind replaying the events of the last few days over and over again. The confrontation with Rebecca, the realization that her daughter had plotted against her, and now the silence that stretched between them like an unspoken rift, one that seemed too wide to bridge. 3 days had passed since Rebecca had stormed out of the house, and Martha hadn't heard from her since. The house, once filled with the sounds of family, now felt eerily empty. In the quiet, Martha tried to steady herself. The initial rush of hurt and betrayal had dulled into something more manageable. Her resolve had hardened. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even her daughter, take control of her life. Gerald, her late husband, had always believed in personal dignity and strength, and in that moment, she drew strength from the memory of him. She wouldn't let Rebecca or anyone else make her feel small. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence and pulling Martha from her thoughts. She glanced at the clock. Midday. Helen had said she'd come by this afternoon. Sighing with a mixture of relief and apprehension, Martha rose from her chair and walked to the door. Opening it, she found Helen standing there, a warm smile on her face, despite the tension that had been hanging over them both since the phone call. "Hey, Martha," Helen greeted, stepping inside and wrapping her arms around her in a brief, comforting hug. "Thanks for coming," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to process all of this. Rebecca. I just don't understand what happened." Helen nodded sympathetically, her gaze softening as she set down her bag and joined Martha in the living room. "You don't have to figure it out all at once. We'll work through it, one step at a time." "I just can't believe she'd go this far," Martha muttered, her eyes drifting to the framed pictures of Gerald that sat on the mantel. "She's my daughter, Helen. She's supposed to be on my side." "Rebecca's confused, Martha," Helen said gently, sitting across from her. "She's scared, maybe even more scared than you. But that doesn't excuse what she's done. And you need to make sure she knows that." Martha ran a hand through her hair, trying to collect her thoughts. "I thought we had this understanding, you know? That she knew I wasn't ready to give up my independence." She kept pushing, and then I saw the papers. It was like everything I've ever known about her just shattered. "I know," Helen said softly. "She's been making decisions for you in her mind, thinking she's doing the right thing, but she's been wrong. And that's not something that can be fixed overnight. She'll need time to process this, just like you need time." Martha took a deep breath. "I just don't know if I can ever trust her again. I don't know if she understands the depth of this betrayal. She's my only child, Helen. And she turned on me." Helen reached over and placed a hand on Martha's. "You've been through so much, and you have every right to feel hurt. But you don't have to decide what to do right now. You need space to breathe, to figure out where you stand. If Rebecca's willing to work through this with you, then maybe there's a path forward. But that's a big if, isn't it?" Martha nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what Gerald would say. He'd tell me to stand my ground, to not let anyone take what's mine. And he'd be right. But the hardest part isn't the betrayal, it's the silence now. I don't know how to move past that." Helen gave her a sympathetic smile. "One thing at a time, Martha. Let the space do its work. The silence might feel heavy now, but it'll clear. And when the time's right, when you feel ready, you'll know what steps to take." Just as she finished speaking, Martha's phone buzzed on the table beside her. She picked it up, half expecting it to be a message from Rebecca. Instead, the caller ID displayed, Daniel. Martha hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello." "Martha," Daniel's voice came through, calm but with an edge of something else, something Martha couldn't quite place. "I'm not sure how to begin this, but I think we need to talk." "I'm listening," Martha said, her tone cautious. "It's about Rebecca," Daniel began, pausing as if trying to find the right words. She's devastated. And, well, I don't think she fully realized the extent of what she was doing. I'm trying to help her see that. She's really struggling, Martha. I think she's ready to make things right." Martha felt a knot tighten in her chest. Was this some kind of manipulation? Another attempt to control the narrative? Or was it genuine? "I need some time, Daniel," she said carefully, her voice steady. "You both need to understand that what happened wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal. And I don't know if I can just move past that. Not yet." "I understand," he replied, his voice softer now. "But I want you to know, we both do, that this isn't about anything other than wanting the best for you. Rebecca just wants you to be okay. To be safe. We've been talking, and she realizes now that she crossed a line. She didn't mean to hurt you. Please just give her a chance to explain." Martha closed her eyes, inhaling deeply as she listened to Daniel's words. She had always thought of him as someone who had her best interests at heart. But now, after everything, she couldn't help but wonder if his motivations had always been driven by something else. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice quiet. "But I need time, Daniel. Don't expect me to just forgive and forget. I have to protect myself." "I know," he said, his tone resigned. "I'm not asking you to forgive us right now. I just hope you'll consider hearing her out." Martha felt her resolve hardening again. "We'll see," she said. "But that's all I can offer right now." The call ended, and Martha sat in the silence, the weight of it settling in. She had never imagined that her family, her daughter and son-in-law, would become strangers to her. What had started as small moments of doubt had escalated into something bigger, more painful. "How do you feel?" Helen asked, her voice cutting through the fog of Martha's thoughts. "I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't control," Martha confessed. "I don't know if I'm ready to face Rebecca again, not after everything." "You don't have to face her right now," Helen said, her voice warm. "Take your time. This is about you, Martha, not them. It's about figuring out what you need. No one can make that decision for you." Martha nodded, grateful for Helen's steady presence. The last few days had shaken her more than she had realized, but Helen was right. She didn't have to rush. She didn't have to fix everything at once. "Thank you," Martha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," Helen replied with a smile, squeezing her friend's hand. "You've been through a lot, Martha. But you're not alone. Not now, not ever." The following days passed in a blur of cautious routine. Martha went through the motions of daily life, but her thoughts remained preoccupied with Rebecca, Daniel, and the unresolved tension between them. The house, which had once felt like a warm, bustling home filled with memories of better times, now felt like a quiet, hollow shell. There was an emptiness that settled in her chest, and no matter how much she tried to distract herself, it was always there, an ache she couldn't ignore. Helen checked in regularly, offering her usual comforting words, but even she couldn't hide the concern in her eyes when they spoke. Martha wasn't sure if it was the betrayal, the realization of her daughter's manipulation, or the crushing weight of isolation that hurt the most. By the end of the week, after another sleepless night of tossing and turning, Martha found herself sitting at the kitchen table, looking over the old photographs of her family. Pictures of Rebecca as a child, her bright smile, her innocence, tugged at her heart. She missed that girl. The girl who had once trusted her, who had once needed her guidance. Martha's phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up and saw that it was Rebecca. Her heart skipped a beat. Was she ready for this? For the conversation that might either heal or break everything further? With a deep breath, Martha answered. "Mom," Rebecca's voice came through, shaky but determined. "I think it's time we talked. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to apologize. I know I hurt you, and I can't undo that. But I need to try." Martha closed her eyes. The emotional pull of hearing Rebecca's voice after days of silence was more than she had prepared for. "I've been thinking too," she said softly. "But I'm not sure if I can just forget what happened. I need time, Rebecca. I'm still processing everything." "I understand. But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I didn't realize how far I'd gone. It wasn't about you, it was about my own fears. I thought I was protecting you when I was really just trying to control everything." Martha's grip tightened on the phone as her heart ached, but she didn't speak immediately. The weight of Rebecca's words hung in the air between them, a fragile thread being offered, but was it enough? "I thought I was doing what was best for you," Rebecca continued, her voice softening. "But I've learned I can't keep making decisions for you. I need to trust that you know what's best for yourself." Martha sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Could this be the beginning of a change? Or was it another well-crafted apology, like the ones she had heard over and over again before? She needed to see action, not just words. "I can't forgive you right now," Martha replied, her voice steady but firm. I need to see that you understand the damage you've caused. This isn't just about a mistake. It's about trust, about respect. I know, Rebecca whispered. And I will prove it to you. I just need a chance. Martha paused for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. She thought about everything, how much she had lost and how much she was willing to risk in order to rebuild the bond with her daughter. Part of her feared that forgiving Rebecca too soon would only allow the same patterns to continue. But part of her, the part that still loved Rebecca fiercely, wanted to believe that this time could be different. I'll give you that chance, Martha said finally. But on one condition. Rebecca's voice was filled with hope. Anything, Mom. I need you to show me that you can respect my choices. No more trying to control what I do with my life. No more trying to tell me what's best for me. I've lived my life, and I still have a lot left to live. If you want to rebuild this relationship, you have to respect that. I understand, Rebecca said, her voice cracking with emotion. And I will. I promise. They sat in silence for a few moments before Martha finally spoke again. I'm not sure what happens next, but I'm willing to take this one step at a time. I'll see you soon, okay? Okay, Mom. Thank you. I love you. Martha hung up, her heart racing. The conversation had been everything she had hoped for and more. But she knew that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Rebecca would have to prove herself, and Martha would have to trust again. The pain of betrayal was not something that could be erased in a single conversation. That evening, Martha took a long walk through her garden, the air crisp with the early signs of autumn. The flowers in her garden were starting to wilt, but there were still flashes of color among the dying leaves. The reminder that change was inevitable, even in the most beautiful places, comforted her. She thought about the bakery she had dreamed of for so long. The idea had been dormant for years, but now, more than ever, it felt like something she could do for herself. Not because anyone expected it, but because she wanted to. Her life had been shaped by family and expectations, but now, she wanted to step into something of her own. Something that was just hers. The phone call from Rebecca earlier had left her with mixed emotions, but she couldn't ignore the glimmer of hope it had sparked. It had been the first step in a long process. But for the first time in weeks, Martha allowed herself to feel a small spark of optimism. Back inside, she sat at her kitchen table again, pulling out the old notebooks where she had once sketched ideas for cakes. She looked at the pages, filled with her dreams and ambitions. It was a different kind of hope now, one born from years of silence and contemplation, but also from the strength she had found in herself over these past few weeks. The next morning, Martha woke up early, as she had done so many times in the past, but this time she felt a new sense of purpose. She didn't know what would happen with Rebecca, or whether their relationship could ever fully heal, but she knew she was strong enough to face whatever came. She had learned that her worth didn't lie in the approval of others, but in her own ability to choose her path. As the sun streamed through the kitchen window, Martha made herself a cup of coffee and sat down with her notebook. She began sketching out her bakery plans again, this time with a sense of determination she hadn't felt before. This was hers to create, and no one could take that away. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something that had been missing: hope. The weeks following that pivotal conversation with Rebecca felt like a delicate balancing act. Martha moved forward with her life, keeping busy with her newfound purpose. The bakery dream that had once seemed so distant now seemed closer than ever. But even as she immersed herself in the logistics of starting a small business, the underlying tension between her and Rebecca remained. They hadn't spoken much beyond their brief exchange, but Martha could feel the weight of the unspoken words lingering in the air. Still, as she worked through the practicalities of her new venture, Martha began to notice a subtle shift within herself. There was a strength in her that had been dormant for years, awakened by her own resilience in the face of betrayal. She was no longer simply surviving. She was living again. One day, while going through the boxes of old family photos in the attic, Martha came across an album she hadn't seen in years. It was filled with memories of family vacations, holidays, and moments of simple joy. Flipping through the pages, Martha paused on a photo of herself and Gerald at their wedding. her face radiant with happiness. Gerald had always been the foundation of her strength, the one who believed in her capabilities when she doubted herself. As the tears welled up in her eyes, Martha realized that this journey, both personal and familial, was not just about finding her way back to Rebecca. It was about reclaiming her own power, her own voice. It was about honoring Gerald's memory and the love they had shared, while also finding her own path forward. It was time to stop waiting for others to validate her choices and to step fully into her own life, regardless of the expectations others placed on her. A few days later, Martha received another message from Rebecca. This time, it was an invitation to lunch. It was simple, a quiet gathering, no agenda, no expectations, just a chance to connect again. As Martha read the message, she felt a mix of emotions. She wasn't sure if she was ready to re-engage, but she also recognized that this was the next step. She needed to keep moving forward, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. On the day of the lunch, Martha chose a light blue dress that had always made her feel at ease. It was casual, but graceful. She wanted to present herself not just as Rebecca's mother, but as a woman who had found her footing again. When she arrived at the cafe where they had agreed to meet, she spotted Rebecca right away. Her daughter was sitting by the window, her hands nervously folding and unfolding a napkin. She looked both familiar and different. Her posture, once defensive, was now open, and her expression softened with uncertainty. "Mom," Rebecca said softly when she saw Martha approach. There was no rush, no agenda. Just a moment of connection. Martha smiled, taking a seat across from her. "It's good to see you." Rebecca nodded, her eyes filled with quiet regret. "I've been thinking a lot, about everything. I know I can't undo the past. I can't erase the hurt, but I want you to know that I'm sorry." Martha's heart softened, but she didn't rush to reassure her. She wanted Rebecca to sit with that apology, to understand the depth of what had been done. She had her own truth to share, and this moment felt like the right time to do it. "I know you're sorry, Rebecca," Martha said gently, "but an apology isn't enough. I need more than just words. I need to see that you respect me, respect my choices, that you trust me to make decisions for my own life." Rebecca's eyes glistened with tears. "I understand. I see now how I tried to take control, how I tried to manage things without ever asking you what you wanted. I thought I was helping, but I wasn't. I just wanted to keep you safe." "I know you were coming from a place of concern," Martha said, her voice soft but firm. "But it's not just about safety. It's about agency, about dignity. You can't protect me by taking away my choices." There was a long silence between them, both women searching for the right words, for the right path forward. Finally, Rebecca spoke again, her voice small but genuine. "I've learned a lot from all of this, Mom. And I know that it's not just about what you want, it's about what I need to do to rebuild trust. I know I can't expect everything to go back to how it was before. I know I've hurt you deeply. But I want to be better, to be the daughter you deserve." Martha looked at her daughter for a long moment, weighing her words and the sincerity in her eyes. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was. But the fact that Rebecca was sitting here, acknowledging the past, and ready to take responsibility, it was a step. A small step, but a step nonetheless. "I'm willing to take this slowly," Martha said after a while. "But it's going to take time. I need you to prove that this change is real. I need to see you show up, not just with words, but with actions. Respect. Trust." Rebecca nodded, her lips trembling as she held back her emotions. "I can do that. I want to do that." Over the next few weeks, their lunches became more frequent. They still spoke mostly of small neutral things, books they were reading, family updates, casual topics that felt safe. But there was an undertone to their conversations, a slow rebuilding of something that had been fractured. Martha also found herself slowly letting down her guard. She found herself laughing with Rebecca again, reminiscing about old times, allowing those moments of connection to break through the walls she had so carefully built around her heart. It wasn't easy, and the past wasn't forgotten, But each conversation felt like a step forward, a quiet acknowledgement that healing was possible. Meanwhile, Martha continued her work on the bakery. The business plans, the licensing, the permits, it was all coming together. But what pleased her most wasn't the logistical success of it all. It was the sense of purpose it brought her, the knowledge that this was hers, something that belonged to her alone. It was a symbol of the independence she was fighting for, an anchor that grounded her in her own sense of worth. And when the first week of the bakery's soft opening came, Martha stood behind the counter, looking out at the small crowd of customers, the scent of freshly baked cakes filling the air. There were no grand celebrations, no loud fanfare. But there was something quietly powerful in the simple act of standing there, of having created something that was entirely her own. Later that evening, as she cleaned up the kitchen, she received a message from Rebecca. It was brief, but it hit Martha's heart with unexpected force. "I'm proud of you, Mom. For everything." Martha smiled softly as she set the phone down. Maybe there was hope for them after all. Maybe, just maybe, they were both learning to trust again. As the weeks went on, Martha grew more confident in herself. She had learned to take up space in her own life again, and she was no longer defined by her role as a caretaker, as a mother, or as someone's wife. She was Martha, strong, resilient, and capable of creating her own future. Rebecca and Daniel, for their part, kept their distance but also respected her boundaries. They had their own work to do, their own growth to undergo. But for now, Martha was content. She didn't need to have all the answers, and she didn't need to rush things. She was moving forward at her own pace, taking the time to build a life that was entirely hers. And that, she realized, was enough. By early autumn, Martha found herself embracing a new rhythm of life. The bakery was growing steadily, attracting regular customers who had heard about her delicious cakes. Word of mouth had spread, and before long, she was preparing custom orders for weddings, anniversaries, and even corporate events. It felt like a fresh start. More than a business venture, it was a declaration of independence. The days in the bakery were long, but fulfilling. She had poured her heart into each cake, each design, each detail. It wasn't just about baking. It was about crafting a piece of herself into something tangible. There was joy in the simple act of creating something from scratch. Despite her success in the kitchen, the emotional landscape of her life was still rocky. Rebecca's apologies, though heartfelt, had not erased the years of strain between them. The delicate truce they had established over the past few months still felt fragile. They continued to meet regularly, their conversations steady and kind, but the unspoken weight of their past hung in the air. Rebecca had taken some time off from her job, using it as an opportunity to reflect and heal. She had expressed a desire to work on herself, to understand the root of her controlling tendencies, and to figure out how she could be a better daughter to Martha. But even with her earnest attempts at change, Martha couldn't help but feel a sense of unease whenever they spent time together. Trust, once broken, didn't heal overnight. One rainy afternoon, as Martha prepared an order for a local event, the doorbell of her shop chimed, and she turned to see Rebecca standing in the doorway, her hands wrapped around a large, worn book. "I've been going through some of Dad's things again," Rebecca said quietly, stepping inside. "I found this in the drawer in his study. I think it's something you should see." Martha wiped her hands on a towel, glancing up at her daughter. "What is it?" Rebecca opened the book, revealing pages filled with careful notes, sketches, and observations. It was a journal that Gerald had kept for years, filled with reflections on life, family, and his own growth. His handwriting was unmistakable, even after all these years. She ran a finger along the faded ink. "This is, from his last year," Rebecca said, her voice catching. "It's his thoughts on what mattered most to him. There's a section here that I think you should read." Martha took the book from her, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the pages. The writing was intimate, personal, his thoughts on the family, his hopes for the future, and his reflections on what they had built together. As she read, she found herself transported back in time to those late-night talks they'd had over tea, before everything became so complicated. But what struck her most was the section at the end, written just before Gerald passed. In it, he wrote about the importance of respect. Not just the kind of respect that comes from obedience, but the kind that acknowledges each person's autonomy. His words, though written for Rebecca and Daniel, felt like a message directly to Martha. I believe, the journal read, that true love and respect between family members come not from controlling or directing each other's lives, but from supporting each other in our choices. It's not about what we can gain, but about how we can help each other flourish, no matter how hard that might be. Martha has always taught me that. We must let her live her life as she chooses. Martha paused, blinking back tears. The words cut deep, but in a way, they were healing. Gerald had always understood her in a way no one else could. His love for her had been rooted in the belief that she was capable of anything, that she was enough just as she was. Rebecca watched her mother quietly, her gaze full of regret. I thought I was helping by taking charge. But I see now what I missed, Mom. I see now that it wasn't about protecting you. It was about controlling the narrative. Martha closed the book and placed it on the counter between them. I know you were doing what you thought was best, Rebecca. But it was never about me needing help. It was about respecting me as I am. It's the hardest thing for a parent, I think, to let go of control and allow their children to make their own decisions, to live their own lives. But it's necessary. Rebecca nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. I've been trying to do that, Mom. Not just for you, but for myself too. I'm learning to let go of old patterns, old fears. And I want to be here for you, not to fix things, but to support you. To respect your choices, just as you always respected mine. Martha took a deep breath. It wasn't perfect. But in that moment, for the first time in years, she felt a glimpse of the relationship they could rebuild. Slowly, they were both learning to change. Not just in words, but in how they interacted with each other. Thank you for bringing this to me, Rebecca, Martha said, her voice quiet but firm. For the book. For your honesty. I can't promise that everything will be easy from here on out, but I can promise you this. I'm willing to try. And I hope you are too. Rebecca's eyes shimmered with emotion, and she nodded. I am. More than I ever was before. As the days went on, Martha found herself caught between the joy of her new independence and the painful reminder of the relationship she had once had with Rebecca. They both moved forward with cautious optimism. The bakery continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of Martha's strength, and her connection to the community grew as people came to appreciate the art she put into each cake, each pastry, each creation. At the same time, the relationship with her daughter remained a work in progress. They spent time together, but Martha continued to set firm boundaries. She wouldn't let herself be drawn into the old patterns of control. Instead, she invited Rebecca into her life on her own terms, gradually allowing her daughter back into a space that had been closed off for too long. One day, as they shared lunch at a nearby cafe, Rebecca surprised Martha with a question. Mom, she said, taking a deep breath. I've been thinking. I know this is a big ask, but would you consider coming back to the lakefront property with me? Just for a weekend. Maybe this summer. Martha paused, considering the invitation. The lakefront property had been a symbol of so much, of control, of tension, of loss. But it had also been a place of family, a place of memories. And maybe, just maybe, it could be a place for them to rebuild. I'll think about it, Martha said softly. But only when I'm ready. It can't be about any agenda. It has to be about being together, in the way we are now, respecting each other's space, not trying to force anything. Rebecca nodded, her face filled with hope. I understand. No pressure. Just, if you're open to it, I'd love for us to have that time again. Martha smiled, the warmth of her daughter's sincerity reaching her in a way that it hadn't in years. We'll get there. One step at a time. As the days passed, Martha felt herself being pulled forward, not by the weight of the past, but by the strength of the present. She continued to pour her heart into the bakery, but she also began to envision a new future with Rebecca. One that wasn't shaped by manipulation or control, but by mutual respect and understanding. Maybe they weren't ready to heal everything just yet, but they were on their way. And that, Martha realized, was enough for now.